Okay, so today started with great news, really great news for any foreign entities that would like to shovel cash at President-elect Donald Trump. The New York Times reports today that the Trump Organization is planning to operate under a different set of ethics rules than it did during Trump's first term in the White House. Specifically, the Trump Organization plans to continue making foreign deals despite the fact that Trump will be the president of the United States. The Times reports that in the months leading up to Election Day, the Trump Organization's de facto leader, Eric Trump, was busy striking up real estate deals in Vietnam and Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. And now Eric Trump reportedly has his eyes set on more deals in other countries in the Middle East and Latin America and Asia. What could go wrong? Now, I know we are in a slowly boiling pot here. After all, Trump is already selling guitars and Bibles and gold sneakers and silver coins and $10,000 watches and NFT trading cards and cryptocurrency and. The list of ways to funnel money into Donald Trump's pockets just goes on and on and on. But this new reporting for the Times shows that even though Trump is about to become the most powerful person in the free world, he and his companies are still open for business. And we are already just seeing just how problematic that is. This week, the Washington Post reported that Chinese businessman Justin Sun invested $30 million in Trump's cryptocurrency. The math of all of it is a little complicated, but this effectively means that a Chinese businessman just pumped more than $22 million of profit into Trump's company. And okay, I mean, maybe Justin Sun thinks Trump's cryptocurrency is just a great investment. But for all intents and purposes, Justin Sun also just handed the Trump family $22 million. And the head of that family, President-elect Donald Trump, could also be very helpful to Justin Sun. That's because Justin Sun is under investigation by the Security and Exchange Commission for allegedly manipulating a different cryptocurrency market. And yesterday, Trump chose an SEC chair who is famously pro-crypto. So Trump's new SEC chair could, if he wanted to, or if Trump directed him to, Trump's new SEC chair could dismiss the investigation into Justin Sun entirely. Now, whether or not Sun offering Trump $22 million of profit will actually influence anything or even help Justin Sun at all, that is unknowable at this point. But these kinds of conflicts are precisely why presidents do not do business like this. It is impossible to know where Trump the business ends and where Trump the president begins. And this one Chinese billionaire buying Trump's cryptocurrency is just the example we have today. Next week, Eric Trump, who again is now the de facto leader of Trump's businesses, he is headed to Abu Dhabi to headline a cryptocurrency conference. Eric Trump is literally traveling to another country to pitch the Trump cryptocurrency to international investors. Are you a rich person from a foreign country? Would you like the opportunity to put a lot of money into the pockets of the American president? Well, you are in the right place. Trump's second term is looking very much like a billionaire's playground. Yesterday, Trump picked former Georgia Senator Kelly Loeffler to run the Small Business Administration. Why pick Senator Loeffler for that role? Well, one big reason might be that Loeffler and her husband who literally owns the New York Stock Exchange, they collectively donated more than $5 million to Trump's reelection effort. And Loeffler is in good company. She is now the 9th major Trump donor to land a top spot in the new Trump administration. To put all of this in perspective, President Biden's cabinet had a net worth of about $120 million. Nothing to sneeze at, but $120 million. Just Kelly Loeffler and her husband alone are worth about $1.1 billion, and that is billion with a B. If you just count positions that need Senate confirmation, Trump's cabinet is worth about $10 billion. Again, President Biden's cabinet worth $120 million. But if you include roles that don't require Senate confirmation, like Elon Musk's role leading the Department of Government Efficiency, if you include those positions, well, The net worth of Trump's cabinet skyrockets to more than $340 billion. Donald Trump is setting up a government quite literally run by billionaires. And today, two of those billionaires, Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, went to Capitol Hill to meet with Republicans in Congress about their new Department of Government Efficiency. Republican Speaker of the House Mike Johnson described the meeting as a brainstorming session, ideating all the ways they could gut the federal government next year. One idea Elon Musk floated was getting rid of all tax credits, including tax credits for electric vehicles. For background here, Musk has previously said that those tax credits help his competitors more than they help his car company, Tesla. So yeah, why should the government do that? We are entering an era of government not just run by billionaires, but for billionaires. Government for the swamp, by the swamp.
We're all excited. I know you're all excited that Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy have joined us today. This is an important day. It's the beginning of a journey. You've heard what DOGE is all about, the Department of Government Efficiency. It's a new thing, and this is a new day in Washington and a new day in America.
Manhunt for the gunman who shot and killed United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson outside a hotel in Midtown Manhattan continues. Thompson was shot at least twice early yesterday morning by a man wearing a black jacket and mask obscuring half his face. Police still have not identified the suspect or a motive, but today, the NYPD revealed that the words deny, defend, and depose were discovered inscribed in the shell casings at the scene. We'll talk about that in a moment. After the shooting, the suspect fled the scene on foot to a nearby e-bike. He was last seen in Central Park after fleeing on that bike north up 6th Avenue into the park. Yesterday, police released the security camera photos showing the assailant at a nearby Starbucks before the shooting. Today, we learned the gunman bought a water bottle and 2 protein bars from that nearby Starbucks. Investigators recovered a video showing where the gunman discarded the items and recovered them as evidence. Also today, NYPD released 2 photos of a person of interest. Those pictures are from security footage recorded in an Upper West Side hostel. It's unclear what date these pictures are from, but you can see the full face there. Detectives have visited and searched one of the hostel's rooms. Joining me now is NBC News correspondent Priscilla Thompson, who's been following the story. Good to have you here. What are the latest developments?
Yeah, so the latest thing that we're hearing about is how exactly this suspect may have gotten into New York City. This idea that he took a Greyhound bus from Atlanta to New York on Sunday, November the 24th. So a week and a half that he may have been in the city thinking about this, planning this, scoping things out. We don't know. But what is clear is that the NYPD is finding the surveillance video and beginning to piece together a fuller picture of the hours, potentially the days leading up to this. NBC New York getting that surveillance video of the suspect on that e-bike on West 85th Street when he was fleeing into Central Park, which is the last known place that police know he was before we now no longer know his whereabouts, at least not publicly. And of course, the big video today, that surveillance video from the hostel where you actually see the full face unmasked. That's been out there today across the TV screens and the newspapers. And so they're interviewing witnesses, people who may have spoken with him or seen him to try to piece together where he was and anything we can learn about him.
So they are calling him, so they're calling it the suspect or assailant in the pictures in the Starbucks. They're calling those images of that individual at the hostel a person of interest. I think there's a technical legal reason they want to do that, but clearly they're interested in finding out who that person is and speaking to them.
Yes, absolutely. And so it seems from what we're looking at just as normal citizens that this is probably all the same person. But police are being very specific about saying the man you see in that Starbucks video with the face mask on, that is a suspect. The person in the hostel video where you see the full face and he's smiling, we know they're reviewing that footage of the person going down West 85th on the e-bike. That is a person of interest who they are interested in speaking to in connection.
So we show that footage. That's after he had gone up into the park, gotten out of the park, right? And then he's out of the park in West 85th. Is that right?
So it's my understanding that this is actually after he flees into the alley, he gets on that e-bike and he's going down West 85th, going into the park. And that's where they lose him.
Gotcha. It's striking to me, there's some of the images we have. It is striking to me that the image of the person at the hostel where you have a full face. There's been several books written recently about facial recognition technology. I had Kashmir Hill, who's a great reporter, wrote a book about it. I had her on my podcast, Why Is This Happening? It's wild how powerful that is. I know in the January 6th investigation, for instance, it was used, you can sort of find everyone. So it would seem to me that that's a pretty, for modern facial recognition technology, that feels like pretty close to what you would need to feed it into the database.
Yeah, it feels like a good photo, and I'm sure the NYPD is running it through their databases now. Maybe they just haven't gotten a hit yet. We don't know, because they certainly haven't released a name publicly. And they also said with this Greyhound news that came out about him coming in by bus that they're trying to track that ticket to see if they can get any information about who he was from that. So maybe they haven't gotten a ping on this face from the photos alone, but obviously working all the elements, but they should have quite a database to be able to do that.
We are anticipating that at some point there's going to be further developments in terms of a name, right, or something closer. But they've given us no indication of if they have geolocated him in any area, like whether he's got out of the city or whether he's got back to Atlanta, right? Like, they don't know any of that?
Right. We know that they were kind of checking Port Authority earlier today, but from what they have shared with the public, no sense of a geolocation where he might be, if he's even still in the city or not. And of course, the big thing, a name. And that hostel where he was seen required ID and payment, but they believe he used a fake ID there. And so it's interesting to see the places where he seemed really good at this, very professional, I guess, if you want to say about this, and the places where you're finding the water bottle, you're finding the protein bars.
We're going to continue to follow this. It's mind-blowing to me that this bee is on the loose right now. Priscilla Thompson, thank you so much for your help.
You bet.
The world's richest billionaire, Elon Musk, and near billionaire Vivek Ramaswamy were on Capitol Hill today to join a bunch of other really rich senators to go over the plan for the misnamed Department of Government Efficiency, which is not really a department. Part of the plan includes spiking unemployment by laying off millions of federal employees and gutting federal agencies. Musk and Ramaswamy have already promised massive cuts to federal agencies Republicans don't like. They also want to cut $500 billion a year from the federal budget and fire the vast majority of federal workers. All told, they want to slash $2 trillion in government spending. DOGE has no statutory authority and is essentially a presidential advisory commission that can make recommendations. Neither Musk nor Ramaswamy have any public service experience, but that's not stopping them. Their targets include the Department of Defense, Sesame Street, the IRS, the Department of Justice, and the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. They're also looking to kill any government programs that have their spending authorization set to expire. And you may want to think twice about celebrating some of this stuff, because the proposal would include ending veterans' health care programs, drug development and opioid treatment, housing assistance programs, health care programs, student loan programs, and Head Start. Republicans and some Democrats are rushing to sign up with this Presidential Advisory Commission's branch in Congress. Publicly, they're celebrating Musk and Ramaswamy's plan to gut the government. But what they say privately is a different story. One senior Republican aide told Punchbowl News, two people who know nothing about how the government works, pretending they can cut $1 trillion, both with decent pulpits to preach from, and the ear of an unpredictable president, disaster. The only good thing is that at some point they'll overpromise and get bounced by Trump. But until then, disaster. Joining me now is Congressman Maxwell Frost of Florida, a member of the House Oversight Committee. There are some Democrats, Congressman, who are tempted to join up with the DOGE committee. That's the real committee, the congressional committee associated with this advisory group. Are you one who is tempted to do so?
Well, as of now, it's not even a committee. It's a caucus, which anyone can make a caucus of anything at any time in Congress. But this is what I'll say. Look, we're going to find room where we can work together, of course, over the next 2 years with our Republican colleagues. But let's be honest about DOGE and this whole thing. It's a joke. We're talking about two billionaires who are cosplaying as government officials, not an actual department of this government. It's an X account right now. And here's my thing. I'm all for making our government more efficient. But we got to look at the the proposition here. The proposition of these two guys is that to make the government more efficient, we got to fire a bunch of people and take away a bunch of funding. And that lack of nuance and actually providing real oversight on how we can make the government work in a better way shows me firsthand that they're not coming at this on the right foot and not coming at it from the right place. I mean, look at Elon Musk. I mean, this isn't even to mention the horrible discrepancies we've seen and the fact that Elon Musk has a vested interest with government contracts. So we have to look into this this issue that we have right now with these two billionaires coming in.
I will note that Musk owns companies with federal contracts. Tesla has at least $352,000 in contracts. SpaceX at least $15.4 billion with at least 12 agencies. Wonder if Doge is going to plan to cut any of those. But, you know, to what the point you just made, it strikes me that, you know, a lot of Americans say, I want government to be run like a business. Well, this is what it looks like, right? They don't have to think twice about how government works. They just come in and say, cut that, cut that, cut that, cut that, and I'm going to go have lunch. I want to play something from, this is, I don't even know if you were alive when this ran. This was in late 1980s or late 1990s. And this was Jim Miklaszewski of NBC News talking about cutting overspending at the Pentagon.
Despite a promise to reform the system, the Pentagon revealed today that it's still wasting millions of dollars each year in the purchase of spare parts. For example, for an Air Force KC-135, the Pentagon paid $75.60 each for 187 set screws that should cost 57 cents. That's a 13,000% increase in the price.
Now, Congressman, this is one area where I actually agree with people who say we need to cut waste in the government. The Pentagon has been bloated and overspending and buying $500 hammers since I was in high school in the 80s. And so this is one where and look at where the spending goes. $71.6 billion in defense spending is spent in Texas, $68 billion in Virginia, $60 billion in California, of $32 billion in your state of Florida, and $27 billion in Maryland. So the interest that these government contractors have in their bloated spending, which is overcharging Americans for real, is distributed throughout all these very important states. And those states have senators who are going to want to defend that spending, and congressmen who are going to want to defend it. Is it feasible for someone like an Elon Musk to say, we're just going to go ahead and start slashing defense spending, which I think a lot of Americans would actually want, and have those people in those states stand down for that?
If that's something they're serious about, I think they'll find bipartisan support on it, right? 75% of our military budget goes towards contractors. And like you pointed out, a lot of these contractors are completely stiffing the American people and ripping away our tax dollars. And a lot of this money goes unaccounted for. I actually have a bill. It's a bipartisan bill, Defense Oversight Act, which passed through the NDAA, which helps empower the inspectors general to make sure that we can figure out where this money is going. So if they're serious about that, I'm in. But like I told you at the beginning, I'm just looking at the way they're coming at this whole thing. Zero nuance, just talking about cutting stuff without looking at it. And I don't know, I'm a bit skeptical that Elon Musk is going to be serious about actually cutting defense spending and looking at these contractors. But we'll see. We'll see. Again, this guy has not had one single successful business that hasn't leached onto taxpayer money. And so we'll see how serious he is about that.
Exactly. To cut government federal contractors that have defense spending that get tax money for defense, but he'd have to cut his own companies. He is in business in Texas and in Florida with government contracts. You're right. He's been made a billionaire by federal tax money going into his businesses. I want to get your comment before I let you go. Trump has picked yet another billionaire. There are about half a dozen billionaires in his new administration. A guy named Jared Isaacman in the next door neighboring district to yours to lead NASA. He's a 41-year-old founder and CEO of a payment processing company called Shift4. He's flown to space twice on commercial SpaceX missions, but he's never worked in NASA or in the federal government. He partnered with Musk and SpaceX in 2022 to pay for the launch of the Polaris program, which is 3 private space flights. He seems to be buddies with Elon Musk, and I guess being a billionaire is his qualifications to lead NASA. Your thoughts?
The same thing on Elon and Ramaswamy. Trump, it looks like he wants to be surrounded by a bunch of people with no experience that are simply happy to cosplay and dress up like government officials. This is a billionaire who spent his own money to go to space and act like an astronaut and be like an astronaut, and now he's going to lead NASA. And it's not leaving NASA just any time. Next year, we have Artemis 2 that is going to send people around the moon for the first time in a long time. This mission is critical because it's going to lead to Artemis 3, where we're actually going to start setting up a station on top of the moon and then actually land on the moon again.
Madame Caldwell, we turn to you first. It seems like Pete Hegseth will not give up. I mean, he is banging down the door. He is banging down the door, but maybe nobody is even inside the house. What's going on?
He's not giving up. And the reason is because essentially Donald Trump has told him to keep fighting, and he's going to do that. But the catch is Donald Trump isn't going out on a limb for Pete Hegseth. I'm told by Republican senators, Republican sources who say that Donald Trump isn't going to fight this fight for Pete Hegseth, but if Pete Hegseth can swim, then he's going to let him try to get confirmed. Meanwhile, what's really telling is the fact that Trump team floated another nominee, Ron DeSantis. And I'm told that that's actually very real, that Ron DeSantis is absolutely in the running should Pete Hegseth flail. And the reality is on Capitol Hill that even the senators who are giving positive vibes about Pete Hegseth, this is making them so uncomfortable. And there's not that many senators that need to defect in order for him to fail this nomination. So, you know, it's a very uphill battle, and there's a lot of questions among senators if he can even make it through next week.
My question, Pete Hegseth making the argument, if he gets this job to lead the Department of Defense, he will stop drinking. Well, what if he doesn't get the job? He's just going to keep on rocking? That's what I want to know. Dave, Kash Patel, John Cornyn said he has heard from people he respects very much that Patel is qualified for the job. He'll be great at it. Obviously not naming names. What kind of people? Who is the camp that could potentially be in John Cornyn's ear saying Patel's the guy?
This is a very long-running discussion in MAGA world and conservative world. Patel gets credit from Trump supporters, and this includes Cornyn to an extent, for being critical of the Russia investigation in 2016 and afterward, writing the Nunes memo, critiquing and debunking parts of what FBI agents looked into in 2016, not revealing it to voters for the election, but investigating things that became problems for Trump as president. He is, whether Democrats like it or not, he's taken very seriously on that. The fact that FBI agents who investigated whether Trump was getting benefits from Russia, whether Russia interfered in the election directly on his behalf, that does matter. And what doesn't matter as much are Patel's moves since he left the administration, since the administration ended. His behavior inside it, and also just his children's books, the way that he has built a brand for himself, complete with scarves, I should say, and logos, advertising himself, signing books with the QAnon slogan, "Where we go on, we go all." That has not come up as much as the fact that the FBI has lost a ton of esteem among Republicans, voters, and senators, and they agree with the Patel critique from 2016.
Leanne, what do you make of this reporting that Trump would go all in and fight hard for Tulsi Gabbard and RFK?
Yeah, so it's interesting to see how Trump has handled all of these nominations. With Matt Gaetz, he wasn't out front. With Pete Hegseth, he's not super out front either. You see a little bit of online push from people around Trump in support of Pete Hegseth, but Trump hasn't really full-throatedly defended Hegseth. Now, with Gabbard and RFK, those are two people who really fulfill Donald Trump's campaign promises. He obviously made a deal with RFK during the campaign in exchange for his endorsement that he would bring him into the fold and let RFK do what he wants with the health agencies. And with Tulsi Gabbard, she is also someone who has become extremely loyal to Donald Trump, someone who is a former Democrat, but out of the nominees, aside from Pete Hegseth, I'm hearing from members on Capitol Hill, Republicans who have a lot of concerns about her. I'm told that RFK is probably going to be fine. I'm told that Kash Patel is probably going to be fine too. But Tulsi Gabbard is one that causes them a lot of anxiety because of her, her meeting with Assad, her claims of being a Putin sympathizer, and of questioning American intelligence. So, we'll see how much he goes to bat for them.
All right, my girl Joyce, I gave you a couple extra minutes there because you're getting the unanswerable question. I want to play a clip from a congressional hearing that took place today where the acting Secret Service director was testifying in front of the Trump assassination task force. And one Republican congressman asked the director about a day when he appeared at a 9/11 remembrance ceremony. Watch this.
I'm asking you a serious question, and you are playing politics.
I am a public servant who has served this nation, and
you won't answer the question
on our day, on our country's darkest day.
Committee will come to order.
Committee will come to order.
I'm asking you serious questions for the American people, and they're very simple. They're not trick questions. Were you the special agent in charge that day?
No, I wasn't. I was there representing the United States Secret Service, sir.
Mr. Fallon, your time's expired.
Did not affect protective operations.
You know why you were there? Because you wanted to be visible, because you are auditioning for this job.
I was there to pay respect for a fallen member of this agency.
You endangered President
out of line,
Biden's life,
Congressman.
Vice President Harris's life, because you put those agents out of position.
Again, that is the acting director of the Secret Service and a sitting Republican congressman. Joyce, today you wrote about the state of the world and the state of the country right now. I mean, this is pure chaos. What's going on?
You know, it is chaos. It's a difficult period for obviously a lot of reasons. When you play that clip, Steph, it's just so out of sync to imagine a Republican Party that is so far advanced into a war with law enforcement. Not very long ago, when I was a sitting U.S. attorney during the Obama administration, Republicans viewed themselves as being a pro-law enforcement party, and they in fact were. And this is, I think, a common theme across all of the chaos we're seeing is this evolution in the Republican Party so that it's become really a cult of Trump as opposed to the party that used to be against Russia, pro-military, pro-law enforcement. And this is the spin out we're seeing from that very dramatic change.
All right, Joyce, new topic. If Kash Patel is confirmed, if Pam Bondi is confirmed as Attorney General, what would it mean for the country to have these two people at the helm of Trump's DOJ?
It'll depend upon whether or not they take their oaths of office seriously, because one of the most important jobs of the leadership of the Justice Department, you know, you have the Attorney General and then the 4 law enforcement agencies. FBI is one of the 4, ATF, DEA, and the Marshals Service. And their duty, their oath is to the Constitution and to doing justice. And the very real risk in this coming presidency, Donald Trump has made it clear that he wants to use the Justice Department. He wants to bend it to its will and make it another political tool in the president's arsenal. He wants to be able to use the Justice Department to engage in revenge prosecutions, punishing his enemies. Presumably, he wants to reward his friends as well. And so it will be up to Bondi and to Kash Patel, if they are confirmed, to draw the line. And this is the issue that senators face in this confirmation. Do they believe that they would be willing to draw that line? Or would they, in fact, surrender the Justice Department to the presidency?
Dave, let's go back to you. You were in Scottsdale, Arizona tonight covering a DNC meeting. It sounds like the youngsters are breaking out over there. What stands out to you about where Democrats are going in terms of their leadership positions?
When their leadership positions are concerned in the party, in the DNC, the Democrats generally agree, and people at home might not, that the party has been rebuilt pretty well since 2016, after the Biden years, that it did about as well as it could in swing states. The choice for the next chair, the front runners we've seen is Ben Wickler of Wisconsin, Ken Martin of Minnesota, both party chairs there, are people who they think have run the parties quite well. And a lot of the discussion here is wait and see, frankly, is Democrats need to be in a position to take advantage when Donald Trump overreaches. Really not if, when he overreaches. when Donald Trump, for example, DOJ comes back with recommendations, if the DOJ that we're talking about right now starts doing revenge prosecutions that don't have a lot of public buy-in, I wouldn't say Democrats feel great about the political situation they're in. They feel pretty positive about the future because, one, Donald Trump will not be on the ballot again. Two, they're pretty good at raising money and organizing the way they didn't used to be when they were out of power. And three, they're looking at this Trump agenda. And if the election was about inflation and Donald Trump coming back and lowering prices, look, meeting in Arizona right now where they are, this is a state that will be affected dramatically if Trump does what he said he would do on tariffs. So they feel, despite everything, like they're in for a very agonizing 4 years, but a 4 years where they can come back into power.
This morning, we're learning new details about how President-elect Trump's mass deportation plans could play out when he returns to the White House. NBC News is exclusive reporting that the incoming administration is preparing a list of countries where it may deport migrants if the countries where those migrants are from refuse to accept them. This according to three sources familiar with the matter. Joining us now for exclusive reporting, NBC's Julia Ainsley, also from El Paso, Texas, Lauren Villagran, national reporter for USA Today. So, Julia, what more did you learn? I mean, what countries are on this list and why?
It's a surprising list, Jose. We're talking about Turks and Caicos, the Bahamas, Panama, and Grenada. Now, I understand they may explore more of those. They definitely want Mexico to be on that list. They want to be able to deport people from inside the United States back to Mexico. It's one of the reasons why Trump has threatened those tariffs recently. But those are small countries that the Trump transition team believes that they can deport migrants to because they think that they have the political and economic and diplomatic pressure to force them to do so. But a lot of those countries are not people who are having a lot of their own nationals come to the United States. So if you're talking about people, say, from Venezuela, a country that won't take their nationals back, they would then be accepting Venezuelans who don't know anything about the culture, may not even speak the language in those countries, Jose.
Yeah, it's so interesting because they're relatively, of all of them, these are relatively small countries, right? I mean, Grenada, the Bahamas, Turks and Caicos, Panama, where, of course, Panama has seen a huge impact on their country because it is very close to where the Darien jungle and all of that area is. But, Lauren, you also have new reporting about how the humanitarian crisis in Mexico is bringing out strong reactions from Mexicans.
Yes, Jose. I was traveling in Mexico recently. Of course, I'm here at the El Paso, Ciudad Juarez border, where, we have seen a sharp drop in migration over to the U.S. side, but more migrants waiting in Mexico. And it's really started to shift public opinion in Mexico against migrants, which is a fairly new development.
Yeah, and so what is it that they're saying?
Yeah, so there are two new surveys out. One from last year shows that 7 in 10 Mexicans believe that migration through Mexico is excessive. You got another survey from the United Nations Refugee Agency showing increasingly negative views against migrants among Mexicans, and also a lot of misunderstanding of why people are migrating. The vast majority of respondents to the UN survey, for example, believe that migrants, are moving through their country for economic reasons to head for jobs in the United States, when more than half of migrants respond to the United Nations' own surveys of migrants saying that, they're fleeing violence and insecurity. As you know, the reasons that people flee their countries are as varied as the people themselves.
Yeah. And Julia, meanwhile, thousands of unaccompanied migrant children continue coming into the U.S. every month. In a very real way, Julia, this is another family separation policy, but created and run by the cartels. Why are they doing it now?
Well, it's something that we've seen ebb and flow over the years. I've heard the Rio Grande Valley area of Texas is one they're particularly watching now for a rise in unaccompanied children. But, Jose, a lot of times when we're talking about unaccompanied children, we might be talking about 16, 17-year-olds. These are little children. There have been children, look at these children, ages 2 and 5, coming with numbers. Smugglers bring them across. They're not coming with groups of people they know. They're coming through smugglers. A lot of times parents get desperate. They send their children. And don't forget, there are new Biden administration asylum policies that make it very difficult for anyone to cross if they are an adult. So in some cases, there are families who are deciding it's easier to risk it, send their child with a smuggler,
and then try to get them into the United States that way. But it's something that the Texas Department of Public Safety has been really following. As you can see, these are their videos. They want to show this, Jose, to show how dangerous these routes are. But let's not forget, this is going to be a state that's going to be working hand in glove with the future Trump administration for mass deportation. So these are the kind of videos we would expect to see from them as they try to crack down on immigration.
So, Jonathan, as we consider all this, let's talk about your latest piece for Politico titled Biden White House is discussing preemptive pardons for those in Trump's crosshairs. In it, you write this, quote, President Joe Biden's senior aides are conducting a vigorous internal debate over whether to issue preemptive pardons to a range of current and former public officials who could be targeted with President-elect Donald Trump's return to the White House. It's according to senior Democrats familiar with the discussions. The deliberations touch on pardoning those currently in office, elected and appointed, as well as former officials who've angered Trump and his loyalists. Those who could face exposure include such members of Congress's January 6th committee as Senator-elect Adam Schiff and former GOP Representative Liz Cheney. Also mentioned by Biden's aides for a pardon, Anthony Fauci, the former head of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, who became a lightning rod for criticism from the right during the COVID-19 pandemic. The president himself, Jonathan, continues, who was intensely focused on his son's pardon, has not been brought into the broader pardon discussions yet, according to people familiar with deliberations. So, Jonathan, what does this look like? What are you pardoning Anthony Fauci for? What are you pardoning Liz Cheney for, who've not been charged or convicted of crimes?
That goes to the heart of this deliberation, Willie, and why this is so delicate, because the White House counsel and a handful of senior White House aides, including Jeff Zients, the chief of staff, are having this debate right now in the West Wing, which is, do we leave these folks out in the cold and potentially expose them to Kash Patel's FBI and Donald Trump's White House for any number of charges or some kind of, show trial to get a measure of revenge and at the very least make them pay six figures in legal bills to avoid such a case? Or do we offer preemptively pardons to people who there's no proof they've done anything wrong whatsoever and really may not want a pardon in the first place? That's a real tough call, because if you don't do it and Patel and company come after some of these people and you had the chance to give them inoculation legally, that's a hell of a thing to regret. At the same time, do you want to pardon somebody like Liz Cheney or Anthony Fauci and suggest any kind of impropriety that could only add fuel to the Trump aggressors in the first place? It's a real tough nut.
So, J. Mart, you've been at this for a very long time, covering national politics for a very long time, and you've done it very well.
Thank you.
Did you ever think that we would be living through an era where we would be talking about pardons, preemptive pardons for people like Dr. Fauci or for people like Liz Cheney as part of the political process that we've been living under for the last 8 years? It's unimaginable.
It's completely shocking to even write this. The idea of offering people who have not been charged with any crime, there's no even hint of committing any crimes, pardons, because the nature of the incoming administration is such that they're pretty open about the idea of pursuing a kind of third world model of when we come in, we go after the old guys. Now, I can hear what the Trump folks are going to say immediately, which is he's only doing what they did to us. And I think, guys, that's what you'll hear next year if the Trump folks do pursue these revenge investigations or indictments of they started lawfare first. They indicted Trump left and right. We're only keeping the same thing going. And you can see it easily right now. And guys, that's why this debate is so serious in the White House and why they're taking this, I think, with some measure of sobriety, even though it is an extraordinary precedent to set.
Yeah, I mean, J. Mart's right. That's the argument that the Trump team will make, as bad faith as it may be. So, Rev, let's get to your take on this. We know that when Trump was leaving office, he considered blanket pardons for a lot of folks. He didn't follow through. But we certainly expect when he walks in the door, he will issue a bunch of pardons, particularly the January 6th convicts. He made that promise on the campaign trail. That was going to happen regardless. But what do you think the impact that this would be if President Biden and his team follows through with this and offers these blanket pardons. We saw what happened when he pardoned Hunter Biden. How do you think that impacts the national political conversation? How is that going to be perceived?
I think it will be perceived mixed at best, and probably would get a lot of people concerned about what precedent we're setting. But let's not forget, Donald Trump not only talked about pardoning the January 6th people that were doing the insurrection, he called them hostages and had them singing as a choir at his rally. So in the background of that, I think that people will be kind of mixed in their reaction if Biden were to do this. From the civil rights community, we've been saying he ought to be pardoning people like Marilyn Mosby, who was the prosecutor in Baltimore, Jesse Jackson Jr., the congressman. Even I have a brother in Alabama who's doing civil work. Look at people, Reverend Kenny Glasgow. We're looking at people that need pardons, that have come out and done well, served the community. That ought to be the standard. And I think to forecast what people may face, I think is something that should be discussed. But I would hope he also looks at pardoning people that have maybe made a mistake, but turned around and done the right thing. That's what pardons are for. And I think we should not pervert that.
Well, you know what's so interesting is you read these articles talking about it, and J. Mart's article. I mean, there are people like Adam Schiff, for instance, who seems to be in the crosshairs, right?
Yes.
And Liz Cheney, Nancy Pelosi. But there are going to be a lot of people like Adam Schiff who say, J. Mart, I'll just let you say this. A lot of people like Adam Schiff who said, don't give me a pardon. I didn't do anything wrong.
Right.
If he wants to come after me, come after me. Just knowing Liz Cheney, I'm sure Liz Cheney would be the same. Like, go ahead, make my day. Come after me for doing my job. Make me a political martyr. Make me the next president of the United States. Here I am. Don't give me a pardon for something I didn't do.
And Joe, I think that you're going to see more of that in the coming days. People who say, don't preemptively give me a pardon because you're going to suggest I need a pardon for something and I don't want that. Please don't do that. Here's the sort of backstory, though, for people who are less high profile than Adam Schiff and Liz Cheney, is people who are serving in the administration in some kind of a point of capacity, the Jack Smith, but also the below Jack Smith level, who are looking at the prospect of a lot of money in legal fees, potentially, if there is any kind of prosecution next year. I think that's a bit of a delicate situation. I talked to some Democrats yesterday, Joe, who said, you know, maybe the better idea is you create a legal defense fund, or you get a handful of Democratic donors to commit to paying the legal fees for everybody who would be targeted by the Trump administration next year for any kind of political indictment. And you take care of it that way. The courts will dismiss the charges, and you absolve innocent folks of paying astronomical legal fees by getting these donors from the party to do the right thing. So we'll see if that happens.
Well, Jonathan, I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the things we were going to talk about earlier when I was talking about fear is, you know, Democrats and others have to stop being fearful. And one of the ways that they could do that is you could get big Democratic donors. You could get law firms, powerful law firms. They could come to an agreement. And we've talked about the politicians, but you talk about the people in the FBI that did their jobs. You talk about people in the DOJ that did their jobs. You talk about the people in the DOD that did their jobs. And those people are the ones that, like you said, Democratic donors, other billionaires who actually want to do something positive with their money. They team up with great law firms, strong, powerful law firms, and you actually take away the incentive to try to drain Jack Smith or try to drain some of these other people who thought they were doing their job and following the law.
Yeah, no, exactly. And look, there's any number of sort of Democratic-leaning law firms, big city law firms full of Democratic lawyers who you can see stepping up and sort of offering to do pro bono work, or at least offering to do work that could be paid for by, you know, the Katzenbergs of the world, along with sort of other prominent Democratic financiers to take care of this. But look, Barnacle is right. The fact that we're even having this conversation about how do you approach taking care of these people who are going to be prosecuted, whether it's a preemptive pardon or some kind of like a massive legal defense fund, does speak to the extraordinary nature of these times. And it's the age-old question, Joe, do you take Trump seriously or literally? Because if you take him literally, he said he wants to put Liz Cheney in prison. So, you know, how do you proceed? It's a sobering moment.
Well, for those of us who actually believe in the third branch, the judicial branch doing their job, I think you're right. You know, if there are people that would back, like people like Liz Cheney and Adam Schiff, Nancy Pelosi, other people financially, and then you have big law firms in Washington, D.C. that said, we're not going to let the rule of law be trampled on here. Then obviously you have people that could fight those fights.
Right.
And then any of these cases would be thrown out. And they wouldn't be drained financially.
And at the same time, it is still a very sobering time. I mean, this is where we are.
Well, no, of course it is a sobering
Donald Trump won the election.
And that's exactly why we need people to step up and do that.